Are you worried about your kids being glued to smartphones and totally disconnected from the real world? Worried about what they might be exposed to online? Perhaps you saw the Swiped documentary on Channel 4 recently that I discussed in a recent video that was quite frankly terrifying and full of absolute horror stories about the dangers of smartphones. Luckily for us, the geniuses over at Apple have got lots of restrictions and parental controls embedded directly into our iPhones that I know most of us are not taking full advantage of. I recently had a conversation with a friend in my real life that perfectly sums this up. So her daughter was due to go on a school trip that was going to be for 5 days, and she was so excited that she was going to be screen free for this whole time because she really felt her daughter needed a break from the screens that she felt she was addicted to 24/7. So I said to her, well, haven't you just got the restrictions on your phone so that you can restrict her screen time? So she's only having a certain amount per day. She's got restrictions of various apps and things. And she said, no, I didn't know you could do that. So I said, well, pass me your phone. I'll do it for you now. And in under a minute, it was all set up. She said, wow, I had no idea it was that easy. And it really is that easy. If you are an Apple user, if your children have iPhones, or if you're thinking about getting your children iPhones or iPads for that matter, because this works across the entire Apple ecosystem, including MacBooks and Macs for under the age of 18, then I've got you covered. I'm going to explain it all and show you really how simple it is to set up really effective parental controls on your devices. Plus, if you're an adult, kind of worried about your own screen time, do we want to use the word addiction? But if you're thinking you want to try and reduce your screen time, there are plenty of tips in here for adults too. Now, I'm going to have to make an apology. If you are an Android user, I'm sure there are other videos that will be able to help you, but I genuinely don't know anything about Android devices. So I'm going to share everything about the Apple devices because I'm a little bit of an Apple geek on the quiet, which is probably why I know this stuff when a lot of people don't. Anyway, if you're new around here, hi, I am Rhiannon Morgan. Everyone calls me Rhi. So great to have you here. I make videos here on this channel about mum life, organisation, managing as a family with children with autism to make life easier, plus trying to stay organised as a woman diagnosed with ADHD in her 40s. So if you're interested in all of that, I'd love to see you around here a little bit more often. So why do we need parental controls? Let's just cover this very, very briefly before we get into what we actually need to do. Smartphones can be totally addictive. We've all seen both adults and kids doom scrolling and then not getting enough sleep, not getting enough done, being exposed to inappropriate content, being exposed to content at times of the day where it's just not helpful. And we've all heard stories of apps being downloaded that shouldn't have been downloaded. They're either just not appropriate for children or end up costing the parents a flipping fortune, or both. The good news is you do not have to do it alone. Apple's parental control features are really, really good. This is not a video sponsored by Apple. Apple do not know who I am. I am, however, a bit of a fan of the system because I feel like when it's set up properly, it's so effective. So my approach to kids and phones is slightly different from that Swipe documentary where they took everything away totally and they believe that all smartphones should be banned for children under 14 and children over 14 would be able to access them. I personally believe if you put the right restrictions in from day one, then children's devices can be used for age-appropriate things with time limits that you're happy with as their parent. And there can be lots of helpful ways to use these devices, such as educational apps, really great ways to learn times tables, accessing their schoolwork, which is a bit of a reality now. I know, having had children go through secondary school, and we're just not able to keep them offline entirely because they do have to go online for schoolwork. And then ultimately entertainment, more specifically when we're on trips and things than when we're in the house. But my children that love things like Disney Plus, and if we're on long car journeys or flying, apps like Disney Plus are amazing for keeping them entertained on those journeys. So the key difference is I've got complete control over what they are accessing in order to monitor it and keep them safe. Beyond the parental controls on the phone, we have a few boundary rules anyway, such as no phones at the dinner table or in the dining room at all. No apps downloaded without permission. They do have to send requests in order to download apps, but all of that is monitored through my phone. And no endless scrolling because there are app limitations in place. And the idea of this is to try and teach the children to have a healthier relationship with screens, because what I really don't want to do is just ban them from them entirely. And then as soon as they are allowed access to them, they end up total smartphone addicts, like so many adults are, and having a really unhealthy relationship with a smartphone rather than having it slowly integrated and learnt to use in moderation. Let's face it, a phone in itself is not inherently bad. It's how it is used. Just as chocolate itself is not inherently bad. Chocolate's great, but if eating chocolate is all you did, it wouldn't be very good for you. So let's walk you through exactly how to set up these iPhone parental controls. Before we get started, you want to make sure that all devices are on the latest version of iOS, which is just the Apple iPhone software, or iPadOS if you're updating the iPads. And you can do this by going to Settings, General, Software Update, and downloading the latest update. You want to make sure that if your child is having a phone that's been previously used by someone else that is totally wiped and it doesn't have anything on it you wouldn't want them accessing. So I would recommend making sure those phones are totally wiped. I will be discussing the benefits of handing down phones and the benefits of children having their own phones perhaps versus just using yours in a separate video, which I will link below when that's live. But there are certain dangers associated with allowing our children to just use our phones. In fact, there are quite a number of them, which we'll discuss in that video. Once the phone's totally updated, it's wiped so you can start from scratch. If you're passing it on from someone else, you want to make sure your child has their own iCloud account. And I know I've seen this is a mistake that so many of my friends have made, that they've just signed into their child's phone using their own Apple ID email, and that way everything that's on their phone also goes to their child's phone, meaning all the text messages and everything, and this can cause so many problems. Your child's also going to need their own Apple ID so that you can set them up as a child and that you can have parental control over that account and monitor it appropriately. Here's how you do it. Go to Settings on your child's iPhone and create new Apple ID for your child. Follow the on-screen prompts, entering their details, and their date of birth will tell Apple how old they are, and ensure they're added as a family sharing member on your account. Once you're done, you'll be able to control and monitor their usage through family sharing or your own iPhone. I cannot stress how important it is that they really do have their own account and not just signed in as you, which would end up causing you so many problems. Next, we're going to set up screen time, and this is where the magic happens. Just to note, I actually have screen time set up for myself as well. We'll get to that in a second. Screen time is a built-in feature on your iPhone that helps to track and control usage. Here's how to set it up. Open Settings on your child's iPhone, tap Screen Time. If it's not already turned on, tap Turn on Screen Time and select This is my child's iPhone. You can then set up and monitor your child's screen time from within your own iPhone in Settings and Screen Time, then scrolling down to see your children's names. As you click into your child's screen time, you'll see their usage, including how many minutes and hours they've spent on each app over the last week. You can also see your own screen time usage here, which can sometimes be a little shocking. And definitely when it comes to anything that's addictive, having awareness is the first stage in correcting the problem. Whether you're looking to monitor your child's screen time or your own, taking a look at what's currently happening and how much screen time is being spent on various apps is a really good place to start. When you set up family sharing and screen time as the parent, it will ask you to pick a screen time passcode. I would personally pick something that is different from your phone unlock code, and make sure you do not share this with your children, because if they know this PIN, they can override the screen time limits and get around all of the restrictions. The first thing I like to set up is downtime. So when we're setting up downtime, you can choose the hours in which your child cannot access most of the apps on their phone. You can set exceptions to these, which we'll go into in a second, but largely most of their phone will not be available to be used during downtime hours. You can change it so that they have different downtime hours on the weekends compared to weekdays if that's something you wish to do, but that's totally up to your discretion. I'd recommend starting downtime a couple of hours before you'd like your children to fall asleep, and have downtime running for at least the first few hours while they're awake, so they are screen free for a large chunk out of their 24-hour period. Setting up this downtime will stop them mindlessly scrolling when they should be asleep, as one of the valid points that was brought up in the Swipe documentary on Channel 4 was smartphones are really damaging children's sleep. Now, ultimately, if those apps are blocked during the night time, during the hours where they should be sleeping, they're not going to be inundated with notifications. They're not going to be doom scrolling because the app is turned off. In the next section down, you can set app limits. Now, these can be set by category, and you could limit the entire category of social media or games and pick how much time you're willing for your child to have on these categories or individual apps per day. As long as you toggle block at end of limit on, then these apps will automatically shut off when the limit is reached. So now we've already got downtime blocked off, which is set times of each day where the majority of apps can't be accessed at all. And then we've also got individual limits on apps. Now, personally, for me, this is just nothing to do with my children. Personally, I actually set limits on social media apps for myself. So after I've spent a certain amount of time on those apps, bear in mind I actually have to use them for my job. Even I know that overexposure to these apps can really impact my mental health. Once I've been on certain apps such as Instagram or Facebook or even email for a certain amount of time, then they shut off. As an adult, I obviously know the screen time passcode and I can override that if I so wish. However, it's a good reminder that really I need to be putting down my phone and doing something else. Next, you want to set always allowed apps. There might be no apps at all that you want to always allow. Maybe you always want them to be able to have access to phone and messages regardless of the time of the day or night, although we can set up who they can speak to and message, and we'll get to that soon. Other apps you may want to consider as always allowed apps, maybe something like Audible or another audiobook app. I know my children like to fall asleep listening to an audiobook quite frequently. I do very similar things when I'm struggling to fall asleep. If they have educational apps on their phones, then perhaps you want them to always have access to those. This, of course, is at your own discretion. You can have a play about with this and find out what works for you and your family. The next thing that's been added recently is screen distance to reduce eye strain, where it pops up a message if your child is holding the phone too close to their face and it won't play the content on the phone until they move it further away from their face. This is something you can choose to toggle off or on. Next, we're on to communication limits. Here you can choose during screen time, which is the time they are allowed to use their device. Are they allowed to contact everyone, contacts, and contacts with at least one contact within the group, or just their contacts? I have my children's devices set to contacts only. Then during downtime, you can choose whether they can contact everyone or contacts only as well. Make sure that you've toggled manage contacts on so that you are in control of when your child adds extra contacts, because bear in mind, if they're adding a contact to their phone, it's someone they're going to be allowed to get in touch with. And I want to know who my children are contacting using their device and to retain control of that to make sure that they are staying safe. You can choose whether your child has the option to edit contacts themselves or not by toggling the bottom button. The next menu, we have communication safety. Communication safety can detect nude photos and videos before they're sent or viewed on your child's device and provide guidance and age-appropriate resources to help them make a safe choice. Under communication safety, toggle on both communication safety and improve communication safety. Next, we have content and privacy restrictions, which you want to toggle on. You can choose whether they're allowed to install, delete, and make in-app purchases, and whether or not that requires a password. Under App Store, Media, Web, and Games, you can select which age is appropriate for your child under each category. Under web content, I'd recommend either ticking limit adult websites or only let your child use approved websites. And then under the Game Center, you can choose whether they're allowed to add contacts to talk to within the Apple ecosystem or not. Under privacy, you can choose whether your child shares their location or not. Now, being able to track your child's location to make sure that they are safe is something I find is really important and a really good feature in the Apple ecosystem. You can monitor what your child is and is not allowed to make changes to, and I'd highly recommend that you don't allow your child to make changes to their account or their password so that you've still got access to their device. There are certain apps on the internet I'm just not happy with my children accessing, most of which are social media. While my children do have access to smart devices, I am not ready for them to be exposed to TikTok, Snapchat, or even Instagram. So to stop them downloading these apps or downloading other apps which may hurt my wallet because they are expensive, I've turned on Ask to Buy. This can be found under family sharing. When you set up family sharing, all the purchases made by that family are charged to the parent or guardian who's in charge of the family, but all of the children who want to make a purchase or download an app need to send a request. As long as you've got Ask to Buy toggled on under family sharing. This means if there's an app they want, they cannot physically download it without sending you a request, and then you have to approve it before they can download it. So no more random apps showing up on your child's phone, costing you loads of money, or just giving them access to something you're not comfortable with. Another thing I do for myself as well as my children is limit the amount of notifications I generally receive. My entire job is based around social media, but still, if I had a notification every time anything happened on Instagram or YouTube, it would be constant pinging all day and I would never get anything done. Equally with WhatsApp, I'm on so many parent groups with school that I've just had to mute them all forever, so I don't get notifications from them at all. And it's only by going into WhatsApp at a time where I am ready to access that content do I see the many messages that need to be dealt with in those chats. So try it for yourself. As much as I'd love to encourage you to hit the bell so you get notifications whenever I post new videos, it's so freeing to not have your phone pinging with notifications all the time, and to only actually go and access content on your phone when you are ready to do that, not when you've been drawn into it by a notification. Something else I do for my children's devices and for mine too, that's not super relevant if you've set downtime to be no access to phones at all evening and all night, but it's slightly more relevant if they're using their device at all in the hours leading up to bedtime. Maybe they're using it for audiobooks or reading or something else that isn't all the main apps, but you still allowed those other things. And that is to set up night shift mode. If you go to settings, display and brightness and night shift, you can toggle it on and off to see how it looks. And during the hours of daylight, it looks a bit odd. It kind of makes the screen a bit sort of browny orangey color. It looks a bit strange, but ultimately it's limiting the amount of blue light that is going straight into your eyeballs. And that blue light can be a real contributing factor if you have too much of it going into your face before bed to stop you from being able to sleep properly. So by flicking on that night shift, which I promise you doesn't look as weird in the actual evening, I have ours set to in line with the sunset, or you can set it for in line with bedtimes, whichever you prefer. And these small changes can help you and your kids fall asleep that little bit easier if you have had any form of screen time leading up to bedtime. Another thing that I love to do is set up focus modes both for myself and for my children. If you go to settings and focus, you can set up different focus modes for different areas of your life. So for me personally, I have a morning routine focus mode where I have no notifications. I have the apps that I use during my morning routine showing, because different focus modes, you can choose different pages of apps that you have set up specifically. Then I have other focus modes where people can get hold of me. I get notifications from text messages and calls from friends and family. I have a work focus mode where very few people can get hold of me, but some people can, such as my husband, my children and the school, because if they're getting hold of me during the day, there's some sort of emergency and I need to know about it. So for your children, you could set up an evening focus mode where they get almost no notifications. I would definitely recommend setting up a sleep focus mode for the entire family, so no notifications are received during the nighttime and no one's sleep is disturbed. Then if they are a teenager and they're taking their phone to school because you want to get hold of them before and after school, you have a school focus mode where they're not getting notifications and getting in trouble because their phone is ringing during class. So the question is, does this really work? And can kids find a way to just get around it? If you tell them your screen time passcode, then yes, technically they could get around it, but make sure you keep that to yourself or change it frequently. And I found that these restrictions work really well for our family. It allows me to let the children have screen time more on some days, like when we're traveling, and far less day to day. There are still some other limits that we have to kind of discuss and put in place. For example, WhatsApp's a bit tricky. I personally find WhatsApp really overwhelming when there are massive group chats, and I've had discussions with my children saying that they are categorically not allowed to be on large WhatsApp group chats or any group chats that are huge for that matter, because I find that they're generally really toxic and where lots of the problems seem to come from with children. The way we're working it at the moment, as I've said, they're allowed to be on group chats with actual people that they speak to in the day. So Will, for example, has a couple of friends he hangs around with during the day, and they continue that interaction outside of school with that same 3 friends on the group chat. I basically only want them communicating with people they know in real life, not strangers on the internet, not randoms that may be in their school year that are on a large group chat that they don't really know, but just continuing to nurture relationships they already have and not start up fake interactions with strangers that they don't know. or acquaintances that they barely know. Obviously, all of this is something I need to monitor as technology advances. Obviously, we've been through all of this once with our eldest, who is now in university, but smartphones and social media are such a changing landscape. Everything changed so quickly that I really feel that as parents, it's something we need to monitor constantly in order to stay up to date. So my personal plan is to review these safety features frequently to stay up to date with any updates. I will update you guys here on my channel with any new updates that come out from Apple, because like I said, I'm a bit of an Apple geek and I'm likely to keep up with those. But it's also just important to keep going back into your child's phone and check that after any updates, that all the settings are still in place, and to look at your child's usage to see what they're accessing, and also to have those conversations about the dangers of speaking to strangers on the internet, following scary trends, seeing upsetting content that's not age appropriate, and quite frankly, some of the upsetting content is just not appropriate for anyone. Having an open dialogue with your children and making sure that they're comfortable to come to you. I always say to my children, if you come to me saying, I'm worried about this, I have concerns about this, I'm not comfortable with this, I think I've done something wrong, but I want to bring it to you, I'm always going to be open to hearing that and to being on their side and helping them. And I think it's important to keep drumming that in and reminding them of that, so they don't end up hiding things from you that they worry will get them in trouble. The idea is, in the long term, that setting up these controls will help them be slowly introduced to the world of smartphones and the internet as a whole, while learning healthy boundaries. Now, obviously, the other option, and something you see a lot of parents doing out and about, trying to keep their kids entertained, is not let them have their own phone and just let them borrow the parent's phone. But this in itself can cause so many problems, a lot of which I bet you haven't even thought of. But I have got a list of these problems and exactly how to avoid them. Click on the video on screen now. I'm going to take you through all of the dangers and pitfalls of letting your child use your phone and how to get around them, and perhaps what might be a better option to do instead. So click over there and I shall see you in the next one. Bye.